Imagine this. Sun-drenched beaches, maybe historic castles, that gentle sound of the Atlantic. And it's your wedding day right there in Portugal. It sounds absolutely amazing, doesn't it?
Oh, completely idyllic.
But, for foreigners like you listening, what does that dream actually look like when you hit the legal side of things?
Right.
So this deep dive is basically your shortcut to getting properly informed. Our mission today, we're digging into this really comprehensive guide you shared, pulling out the absolute must-knows, things like the legal hoops you jump through, the actual steps, and honestly, some pretty surprising details about tying the knot over there. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, the idea of a destination wedding or maybe moving to Portugal to get married, it sounds incredibly romantic.
Totally.
But the process itself, while it is structured, it can definitely feel a bit daunting if you don't know where to even begin.
I bet.
What's quite insightful here, I think, is how Portugal has actually managed to streamline things. I mean, internationally, this stuff can get incredibly complex.
Oh, for sure.
They offer a pretty clear framework, but, and this is key, it still has some very specific rules you absolutely need to be aware of.
That makes total sense. And, okay, before you're even thinking about flowers or venues, there's this really fundamental first step, right? Proving your legal capacity to marry.
Exactly.
For someone coming from another country, that sounds like it could be a pretty big hurdle right at the start. What does that actually involve? Where do people stumble?
You've hit the nail on the head. That's the critical starting point. Proving your legal capacity basically means you have to show, officially, that you aren't currently married.
Right.
And that there are no legal reasons under Portuguese law why you can't get married. This applies to everyone, all foreigners, doesn't matter where you're from or if you live there already.
Okay.
It's really about establishing, legally speaking, that you are genuinely free to marry. And the biggest snag, honestly, it often comes down to the paperwork.
The paperwork, always.
Yeah, making sure you have that official proof of your single status and that it's in a format Portugal recognizes.
So it's not just ticking a box, it's like the foundation for everything else. Knowing that up front really hammers home that preparation is absolutely key right from the get-go.
Precisely.
Okay, so once you've cleared that foundational step, what's the actual roadmap? The official journey. Where does it start?
That's where the processo de casamento kicks in.
Yeah.
It's your formal declaration of intent to marry.
Processo de casamento. Got it.
You and your partner, you need to head to a civil registrar's office, the Conservatoria do Registro Civil.
Okay.
You can go in person or sometimes through a designated attorney. And this isn't just a quick sign-in sheet.
No.
No, this is where you lay out all the specifics, like what kind of ceremony are you planning? Civil? Catholic? Maybe another recognized religious one? You also state your preferred date, time, location, and, this is really important, your chosen marital property regime.
Whoa. Marital property regime right there at the beginning. When you're just saying you want to get married, that feels early.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yes, it's baked right into that initial declaration. And here's a really interesting point. Brazilian citizens, if they have that equal rights and duties status, they actually get a unique perk. They can complete this whole initial declaration bit online.
Online? No way.
Yep. It sounds like a small thing, maybe, but it's actually a huge example of how these specific bilateral agreements can really cut through international red tape.
Yeah.
It shows those strong ties between Portugal and Brazil.
That is fascinating. Okay, so you've made the declaration. What are the next sort of bureaucratic hurdles?
Right. So once that declaration is in, it moves into the document submission and verification stage.
Yeah, okay.
The registrar goes through all your paperwork meticulously. This usually takes several weeks. And it's actually not uncommon for them to come back and ask for more documents if something isn't quite right or complete.
Good to know. Expect potential delays.
Exactly. Then comes this quite traditional practice of publication of bans.
Bans, like in old movies.
Pretty much. It's a public announcement of your intention to marry. It usually lasts for 30 days. The idea is to give anyone with a valid legal objection a chance to step forward.
Huh. I wonder how often someone actually objects these days. Sounds dramatic.
Hopefully never. But assuming no impediments pop up during that time, the civil registrar then gives the official green light. They formally authorize your marriage.
Okay.
And this authorization is key because it's valid for 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah, which gives you a really decent window to actually schedule and have your ceremony. And if you opted for a religious ceremony, you get specific paperwork from the registrar that you then take to your priest or minister.
Right, right. That 6-month window sounds like a bit of breathing room, especially for sorting out international plans. But it's also a definite deadline you've got to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
And to make sure you actually meet that deadline without any last-minute chaos, you've absolutely got to get the paperwork right. You mentioned this is where people get overwhelmed.
It often is.
So what are the absolute must-have documents that our sources really stress?
You're spot on. Careful documentation is probably the most critical piece. First up, your primary ID. That means your residence permit, passport, or something equivalent. Make sure it's valid for the whole process.
Okay, standard stuff.
Then your birth certificate. But, and this is crucial, it needs to meet very specific criteria. And it has to be recently issued. We're talking no more than 6 months before you apply.
6 months. Noted.
It needs to be an official copy from your home country. And depending on where you're from, it needs to be properly apostilled.
If your country is part of the Hague Convention.
Exactly. Or if not, authenticated by the Portuguese consulate in your country.
Yeah.
And critically, it must be translated into Portuguese by a certified translator.
That apostille and certified translation part, that sounds like something you need to plan for well in advance. Any tips there?
Definitely requires foresight. Don't leave it till the last minute.
Yeah.
Another absolutely vital document is the Certificate of Matrimonial Capacity. People often call it a certificate of no impediment.
Right, proving you're single.
Essentially, yes.
Yes.
It's your official proof that legally you're free to marry, no existing ties. This also needs to be issued less than 6 months before you apply. It needs to be legalized or apostilled and translated if it's not in Portuguese.
Okay.
Now, there's a key exception here. British citizens.
Yes, you mentioned this.
They don't usually need that specific certificate. Instead, they typically provide an affidavit, which they swear at the British consulate in Portugal.
That's super helpful for any UK listeners tuning in.
And then, of course, there are special circumstances. If you've been married before, you'll need your final absolute divorce decree.
Final and absolute key words.
Very key. Or a death certificate if you're widowed. Annulment papers if that applies. And if you're planning on having a prenuptial agreement, that has to be drawn up by a Portuguese notary and submitted along with your marriage application.
Okay.
So yeah, if your past isn't perfectly simple, or if your home country isn't in the Hague Convention, you'll definitely have some extra steps to make sure all your documents are good to go.
That makes perfect sense. So moving beyond the ceremony itself, you mentioned this earlier, and it sounds huge. Choosing your marital property regime.
Yes.
This isn't just some bureaucratic detail, is it? It sounds like it has really big, real-world consequences for your finances, your future together.
It absolutely does. It's vital to understand because this choice dictates exactly how your assets and debts are handled during the marriage, and crucially, how they be divided if, heaven forbid, you divorce or upon death.
Okay. So what are the main options in Portugal?
Portugal offers 3 main property regimes. Each one is quite distinct.
Let's hear them.
Okay, first is the accrual system. In Portuguese, it's comunhão de adquiridos. This is the default.
Default meaning if you don't actively choose something else, this is what you get.
Exactly. Under this system, any assets you acquired before the marriage, they stay yours individually. Same goes for inheritances or big gifts you receive personally during the marriage. But anything acquired after the marriage, through your joint effort salary, investments you make together, property you buy that becomes shared property.
Sounds like a balance.
It is. A lot of expats find it appealing because it offers that protection for what you brought in, but fosters partnership for what you build together.
Makes sense. What's next?
Next is general community property, or concunc general. This is the, let's say, most comprehensive sharing option.
Okay.
Pretty much everything becomes joint property. Assets from before the marriage, after the marriage, most inheritances, donations. It all goes into one pot.
Wow, okay. All in.
But here's a fascinating and very significant restriction. You cannot choose this regime if either you or your partner has children from a previous relationship.
Really? Why is that?
It's designed to protect the inheritance rights of those existing children. It stops their potential inheritance from automatically being halved, effectively, by becoming joint property with the new spouse. It shows a real societal value placed on protecting kids from prior relationships.
That's actually really thoughtful, like, legally speaking. Okay, what's the third one?
The third main one is separation of property, separação de bens. This is exactly what it sounds like. Complete financial independence.
Okay.
Each spouse owns and manages their own assets and debts individually. Totally separate financial lives, legally speaking.
Right.
Now, here's another really intriguing rule. This regime is mandatory if one of the spouses is over 60 years old.
Mandatory over 60. You can't choose anything else.
Nope. If one of you is 60 or older, you automatically fall under separation of property. It's not just a quirk. It reflects a legal aim to protect older individuals, perhaps from complex financial situations or potential vulnerability in later life marriages. It prioritizes individual financial security for older citizens.
That is genuinely fascinating, a real insight into the legal thinking.
Isn't it? Beyond that mandatory rule, couples can also choose separation of property voluntarily. It's often picked by international couples who might have complex assets in different countries.
Makes sense for simplifying things across borders.
Exactly. And one more thing, couples aren't strictly limited to these three. You can create a custom property regime through a prenuptial agreement drafted by a Portuguese notary as long as it stays within legal boundaries.
Wow, okay. That over 60 rule is definitely sticking with me. It really makes you think. So, picking the right regime, it's not just ticking a box on a form, it's fundamentally defining your financial partnership.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So once you've made that big decision, got the legal stuff lined up, then you can finally focus on the ceremony itself. Portugal offers a few different ways to actually get married, right?
That's right. There are essentially three recognized types. First, you've got civil ceremonies.
The standard legal one.
Exactly. Conducted by a civil registrar. They're usually pretty brief, focused on the legalities. You can have it right there at the civil registry office. Or you can choose an approved external venue, though that usually costs extra.
Okay.
And importantly for international couples, interpreters can be arranged if needed.
Good to know. What else?
Second, Catholic weddings. These are fully recognized by Portuguese civil law. The key thing here is you have to complete the civil registry process first, get that authorization.
Okay.
Then, after the church wedding, the church itself handles the paperwork to make sure it's registered civilly.
It's seamless. And the third type?
Third is other religious ceremonies. These can also be legally binding, provided the officiant, the priest, imam, rabbi, whoever, is officially registered with the Portuguese authorities. The process is quite similar to the Catholic one. Get the civil pre-approval first.
Got it. So options depending on your background and preference. Now, the practical bit, money. For any big life event, you need a budget. What are the typical costs for just the official legal parts we've been talking about?
Well, the basic registration and processing fee is actually surprisingly reasonable. It's €120 for a standard marriage at the civil registry during their normal working hours.
120, that's not bad at all.
Right. But then there are additional service fees for premium options.
Right.
If you want the ceremony outside the registry office or on a weekend or public holiday, or maybe you need expedited processing, that's typically an extra €200.
Okay, €200 for flexibility. Makes sense.
And for those prenuptial agreements we talked about, choosing one of the standard property regimes costs €100. Setting up a custom one is €160. And if you need to change it later, that's a €30 fee.
Right.
But beyond those direct government fees, you absolutely need to remember to budget for other things. Document translation that can add up, apostille or legalization fees for each document, any notary services, especially for prenups, and maybe legal consultation fees if your situation is complex. Those are variable costs.
That's a very clear breakdown, thanks. Okay, so picture this. You've navigated the paperwork, chosen your regime, had a beautiful wedding in Portugal, fantastic. But now, especially for international couples, the big question looms. You go back home or move somewhere else. Is your Portuguese marriage actually recognized? This feels like it could get complicated.
It's a super important point, and yes, it can have layers. Generally, for EU citizens, a marriage legally performed in Portugal will be automatically recognized in other EU member states.
Okay, within the EU, mostly straightforward.
Mostly. But there's a key nuance, especially concerning same-sex marriage. Portugal legalized it back in 2010, which was quite progressive.
Yeah.
However, not all other EU countries have the same recognition framework, even if they allow same-sex marriage domestically. The rights associated with a foreign same-sex marriage might differ. So even within the EU, it's always a good idea to register your marriage in your home country. Just makes administration easier down the line.
Good advice. What about for non-EU citizens? Say someone from the US, Canada, Australia.
For non-EU citizens, recognition really depends on the specific laws of your home country and any bilateral agreements it has with Portugal. There isn't usually automatic recognition.
So what steps do you typically need to take?
Usually the process involves getting an international marriage certificate from the Portuguese authorities after your wedding. Then you'll likely need to get that certificate apostilled, if your country uses the apostille system, or legalized through embassies consulates.
Okay.
You'll probably need to register the marriage with your home country's embassy or consulate in Portugal or back home. And almost certainly, you'll need official translations of your Portuguese marriage certificate for use in your home country.
Wow. Okay, several steps there.
And beyond just recognition, international couples really need to think about the practical side. How does this Portuguese marriage affect things like travel visas, long-term residency rights, taxes in both countries, inheritance planning, even Social Security benefits?
Oof, lots to consider.
Definitely. Consulting legal professionals who understand the laws in both Portugal and your home country is highly recommended, especially if you have assets or ties in multiple places.
So, that marriage certificate from Portugal can have legal and financial ripples spreading far and wide. Really underscores why understanding this stuff is so crucial. Okay, finally, let's touch on how your specific nationality might tweak this process, because you hinted it's not quite the same for everyone.
That's right. While the core process we've outlined is generally the same, there are definitely specific wrinkles depending on your passport.
Like for British citizens, you mentioned the affidavit.
Exactly. British citizens are exempt from needing that standard certificate of matrimonial capacity. Instead, they do the affidavit at the British consulate, swearing they're free to marry. They might also need some extra documents proving single status from the UK. And of course, post-Brexit, they need to be extra careful about residency rules and visas if they plan to stay in Portugal long-term.
Gotcha. And Brazilians, you mentioned the online declaration.
Yes, Brazilian citizens generally have a smoother ride, thanks to that equal rights and duties status. The online declaration is one perk, and often documentation requirements are a bit simpler too. Similar benefits sometimes apply to citizens from other CPLP countries, the Community of Portuguese Language countries, like Angola, Cape Verde, Mozambique. Bilateral agreements often streamline things.
Okay. What about, say, U.S. citizens?
U.S. citizens typically need what's called an affidavit of marriageability, usually obtained from the U.S. Embassy or consulate in Portugal. If they've been married before, the documentation proving the divorce is final needs to be very thorough. Apostils on all U.S. documents are essential, and they really need to consider the U.S. tax implications of living abroad and being married, which can be complex.
Right. American tax law follows citizens everywhere.
Pretty much. And then for citizens from some Asian and Middle Eastern countries, the process can sometimes involve more steps. Things like needing extra layers of document authentication, perhaps through multiple ministries or embassies. Translations might need to be more extensive. Sometimes proof relating to religious or cultural marriage customs is required, and verifying single status can occasionally be more involved just due to different legal systems and record-keeping back home.
It really is a powerful reminder, isn't it? Even within a fairly clear Portuguese system, those specific details tied to your nationality can be the difference between smooth sailing and hitting a major snag.
Absolutely. Forewarned is forearmed.
Definitely. Okay, before we wrap this up, let's quickly run through some common questions people ask. We pulled these from the sources. What are some key practical takeaways here?
Yeah, some rapid-fire answers. How long does it all take? Typically, aim for 6 to 8 weeks from when you submit the declaration to getting the authorization. But big caveat, it can vary a lot depending on how complex your documents are or if the registrar asks for extras.
Okay. Can you marry in Portugal if you don't live there?
Yes, absolutely. You don't need to be a
Different.
resident, but expect maybe a bit more paperwork and potentially longer processing times just due to getting documents from abroad.
What if your divorce isn't quite final yet?
Critical point. You cannot even start the marriage process in Portugal until your previous divorce is 100% finalized, official, done and dusted. Trying to marry before that is a massive no-no. Could even lead to criminal charges for bigamy.
Wow, okay. Don't even think about it. Language. The ceremony.
Civil ceremonies are officially in Portuguese. But if you or your partner aren't fluent, you can and absolutely should arrange for an interpreter.
Good. Same-sex couples?
Yes, absolutely fine. Portugal has recognized same-sex marriage since 2010. The process, the rights, the requirements exactly the same as for opposite-sex couples.
Excellent. Can you change that property regime you chose after you're married?
Yes, it is possible. You both have to agree, obviously. It involves a legal process, and there's that 30 fee we mentioned. But it's definitely wise to consult a lawyer before changing something that significant.
Makes sense. How long is that marriage authorization valid again?
6 months. You have 6 months from the date the registrar authorizes the marriage to actually hold the ceremony.
Got it. And witnesses? Do you
Yeah.
need them?
Yes, you need two witnesses for the civil ceremony. They have to be 18 or over, mentally competent, understand the language the ceremony is conducted in, or have an interpreter, and in some specific legal context, they can't be too closely related to the couple.
Phew. What a comprehensive deep dive into Portuguese marriage law. It really highlights just how much sort of background planning and legal understanding goes into what feels like such a personal, joyful moment.
It really does. You're navigating a whole legal system just to say, I do. And if you step back and look at the bigger picture, this whole process really shows that fascinating point where personal dreams, like getting married in a beautiful place, meet these big global legal structures.
Hmm.
It demonstrates how even a commitment as intimate as marriage requires you to engage with this complex but hopefully well-defined system. A system designed to protect individual rights but also maintain societal order wherever in the world you happen to be tying the knot. It really speaks to the global nature of life today.
That's a great way to frame it. So as you, our listener, might be dreaming of that perfect day on the Portuguese coast, maybe sipping some vinho verde, consider not just the vows you'll exchange, but also that invisible global thread that connects your personal union to countries, legal systems, and financial implications far beyond the wedding arch itself. It shapes your future in ways you might not even imagine yet.